We recap the Kings preseason game in Salt Lake City, tell you about an extension for the head coach, and it's time for another Kings fan feedback show on this episode of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast. It's a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years and a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. We start off with some news involving the LA Kings and head coach Todd McLellen, who have reportedly agreed on a one-year contract extension. Now, McClellan's contract was due to be up after this season, so it is a slight vote of confidence. I've said before that I was in favor of the Kings not signing Todd McLellen to an extension and essentially making him coach for his job this season. I still believe that that's the case. If the Kings struggle at all this season, I believe the Kings will make a coaching change. This doesn't prevent that. And if the Kings just get to the playoffs and then exit quickly in the first round, they're going to get rid of the head coach, and this contract extension doesn't prevent that. Like I said, it is a slight vote of confidence in Todd McLellen, who has helped the Kings turn things around, who has gotten them into the playoffs each of the last 2 years. But as the investment has continued to grow in the ownership into this team, the money they're paying to the cap, bringing in player after player, it is now time to go beyond the first round of the playoffs. So we all know this, from the players to the fans to the organization. So they give McLellen the one-year extension. It means he's got a slight vote of confidence. So like I said, I would have not done this, but I don't think it affects things one way or another in a huge way. If he doesn't get the job done, he's still going to be out. This means he will get an extra year of pay, though, if the worst happens. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully the Kings have a great season. They advance out of the first round of the playoffs. McClellan goes into next year on a one-year deal, and maybe they extend him then at that point. But things obviously are still to be proven for head coach Todd McLellen. We are 5 days away from the regular season opener for the LA Kings as they get ready to host the Colorado Avalanche this coming Wednesday. Kings played their second to last preseason game last night in Salt Lake City. It's been an interesting preseason for the Kings as far as where they've been. 2 games in Australia, a game in San Diego, now a game in Salt Lake City. They were playing the San Jose Sharks in the old Frozen Fury. Used to be in Vegas back in the day, but the last few years it's been in Salt Lake City, Utah. Kings post a 4-3 overtime win. Adrian Kempe scores the OT game winner. I think he's got 5 goals now this preseason, so a nice preseason for Juice. Pierre-Luc Dubois gets his first goal as an LA King. You also had Anze Kopitar and Trevor Moore getting goals as well. We're going to focus on a few aspects of this game, and got to start with the penalty kill. San Jose had 5 official power plays in this game. They scored on one of them. The Kings actually did a pretty good job on the penalty kill, but in the final moments, talking about the one that they scored on, San Jose scored on, but the final moments of that penalty kill, the Sharks did get a deflected shot in the high slot that was able to beat Phoenix Copley, who was in net. So that was the only goal that was scored shorthanded. Now, the Sharks don't have a great power play, and you would obviously have loved to see the Kings pitch a shutout in that regard, but the PK still seems to be a work in progress. There was the one goal allowed, but overall a decent job of the Kings on the penalty kill. I would say Trevor Moore has gotten spot duty on the PK, and I think it has, at times to do with, has he just had an offensive shift as far as him going out on the penalty kill? But he looks really, really good so far this preseason. He's got a lot of jump, and he has had a couple of good shorthanded chances. And I think having a threat like him on the penalty kill who can really score, has good instincts, and get some shorthanded opportunities, that helps your penalty kill out as well. If you've got a bunch of guys out there that are, they're good at killing penalties, but they don't have any ability to kind of strike back, maybe put some fear into the other team when they're on the power play, I think Trevor Moore and his skills shorthanded are going to help that penalty kill, hopefully, if he stays healthy all year, which he wasn't able to do last year. So a pretty decent job on the penalty kill for the Kings. Goaltender Phoenix Copley had a much better outing this time than he did in his preseason opener. That was the first game in Australia where I thought he looked pretty shaky. He turned aside 24 of 27 shots. We mentioned the deflected shot in on the power play. That's obviously not a soft goal. The second goal Copley allowed in was off a big rebound off his pad. Definitely could have had better rebound control on that one. And then the third goal was after a Matt Roy turnover behind the Kings net. Shot came from the side of the net. It deflected off of Trevor Moore's skate and went in. So hard to blame Copley on that one. But 2 of the 3 goals, I would say, were legitimate goals. 1 goal, the bad rebound allowed. So all in all, I thought a better night for Phoenix Copley for sure than his first outing. I thought his rebound control could have been better. He wasn't great playing the puck, but he did have some really solid saves. So I would say a B+ effort from Phoenix Copley in this one, much better than that, I don't know, C- D effort he gave in his first outing. So improvement from Phoenix Copley. It's going to be really interesting to see which one of the Kings' 3 goalies, Copley, Cam Talbot, or David Riddick, are going to be placed on waivers because they're not going to keep 3 goalies. I think they've all played pretty well. I think I would expect David Riddick to be in the final preseason game to get one final look at him. They could also go with Cam Talbot, thinking that he's going to be the number 1 to go on Wednesday, and they want to give him a little bit more work, one more tune-up before that. But we shall see. But it's going to be an interesting decision. It was good to see Phoenix Copley bounce back from that first preseason outing. So we shall see. We wanted to check in on Alex Laferriere. He played in place of the suspended Arthur Kaliev on the third line with PL Dubois and Kevin Fiala. I thought he looked okay. Definitely didn't look out of place or lost at any point. He had 2 shots on goal, ended up being a +1. Certainly not a spectacular effort from him, but certainly not bad either. I would say it was just a good outing for Alex Laferriere, who's still trying to get his feet wet, playing at the NHL level and playing alongside NHL caliber players, and in this case, elite players like Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kevin Fiala. Again, he didn't really stand out, but he also didn't look out of place playing with them as well. So I think that's a fairly encouraging sign. And it was talked about on the broadcast. If you were able to watch the broadcast, Arthur Kaliev, if you missed it, suspended for 4 games, 2 in the preseason, 2 in the regular season. And the Kings have some issues regarding the salary cap. So according to Cap Friendly, the Kings have $123,333 in cap space available right now. Now, even though Arthur Kaliev cannot play in the first 2 games of the season, that salary still counts against the cap. It's not because he's suspended. Somehow his salary comes off the books for 2 games. So the Kings, for example, if they add Alex Laferriere, who's not currently on the active roster, he makes a little over $800,000. So they would obviously be over the cap. So the Kings, for example, if they sent down a Jared Anderson Dolan, that would take his salary off the books. But of course, they risk losing him on waivers, which they might end up having to do anyway. But the Kings could go with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen to start the season. But we'll see how it goes. So there's still some the loss of Kaliev complicates things a little bit. And it's what we talked about when the Kings signed Pierre-Luc Dubois. They gained talent, but they also lack depth now if things happen like an injury or a suspension. So there'll be moves to make as far as what happens with the LA Kings and the final roster coming up. And again, it's complicated a little bit because of the Arthur Kaliev suspension. Did want to check in again on that third pairing defensively. It was Andreas Englund with Brandt Clark this time. The game before, we saw Englund with Jordan Spence. I thought both played okay. Englund was not nearly as noticeable physically as he was in the last game against the Ducks. I remember he had maybe 1 hit where he had 5 hits in the Anaheim game. Neither he nor Clark had a point in the game. Both finished as even players as far as plus minus. I thought Clark stood out more because of the 2 penalties that he took. One of them was a bad call. He lifted a guy's stick and the guy went down and they called that a penalty. But he did have a bad tripping call where he got kind of caught flat-footed. The player went around him. He ended up getting his legs tangled up with the player, and that was not a good penalty. But I still have Andreas Englund penciled in as the starter on the third pairing on the left side, and I think the Kings are going to keep both Brandt Clark and Jordan Spence and probably rotate them in and out of the lineup. But I thought nothing really stood out to me for Englund or Clark positively. They were both okay against the Sharks. As far as the overtime, I do have to comment. Flawless overtime for the Kings. Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, and Adrian Kempe on the ice. Kopitar wins the draw to Doughty, Doughty to Kempe, Kempe to Kopitar. They go in the zone. Kopitar drops it for Doughty. Doughty drops it for Kempe, who comes in, shoots, and scores. Game over. Drive home safely. San Jose never touches the puck. That's exactly what you want to do in overtime. So hopefully we see more of that coming up this regular season. Overall, the game, I'd give the Kings C+ grade in this one. They were good, but far from great. They played a lot better, I thought, against the Ducks. Good enough effort, good enough execution. Will need to be much better, though, in their season opener because they're taking a much bigger step up in competition, taking on a team like the Colorado Avalanche, who are contenders to not only win the Western Conference, but to win the Stanley Cup this season. Just a couple of quick random thoughts about watching the game. If you saw it, it is an interesting setup there in Salt Lake City at the Delta Center where the Utah Jazz play. It's not made for hockey, so it's like I said, it's an interesting looking setup. The Kings are now 6-1-1 this preseason. I don't put a ton of stock in preseason records, but I'd much rather they be 6-1-1 than 1-1-6, for example, or something like 1-6-1, something like that. I thought I heard a beat LA chant at some point during the night. Now I know it was in Utah, and I know the Jazz and the Lakers have had their issues in the past. I don't know if that's something, but I mean, this is essentially a Kings home game. It's supposed to be. And Trevor Lewis is from Utah. He was back home playing in his home state. So that, I don't know if I heard right or not on that, but I hope I didn't hear right on that. So that was a quick recap of the second to last preseason game for the LA Kings last night in Salt Lake City. 4-3 overtime win over the San Jose Sharks. The LA Kings will close out the preseason Saturday afternoon, 1 p.m. Pacific time against the Vegas Golden Knights at Crypto.com Arena. Catch every moment of the Kings' hometown broadcast on SiriusXM using the SXM app. Search LA Kings. It is Friday, so it is time for our weekly Kings fan feedback segment. We'll start with our emails next on this edition of Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Birddogs. What are Birddogs, you ask? Well, they're shorts that have a liner built in. Your underwear basically is built into these shorts. And you might ask yourself, why would anyone want to wear that? And the answer is super easy. They are comfortable and they look great. And honestly, how often does something that looks good feels good as well? It's the perfect combination. You can wear them out to a nice meal, a nice dinner, or you could even work out in them, do yard work, things like that, because they're so comfortable and stretchy and you can be active in them. But again, they look really, really good as well. And once you try them, you're going to wonder why you've never heard of these before. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and enter the promo code LockedOnNHL. When you do that, they're going to throw in a free water bottle with every order. Again, that is birddogs.com, birddogs.com, and enter the promo code LockedOnNHL for your free gift. All right, it is a Friday, so time for some fan feedback. We're going to start with an email from Scott in Simi Valley, and this is regarding the Sammy Fagemo loss. He says, the moment I read the Kings had sent him to waivers, I was almost sure he'd get picked up, especially with his strong preseason. On Monday's show, you gave some good reasons behind the Kings not exposing Jared Anderson-Dolan or Carl Grundstrom to waivers instead, but I believe the best reason to do just that, to expose JAD to waivers instead of Fagemo, is that Jared Anderson-Dolan would not have been claimed. You described Bjornfoot's play as vanilla. Yes, I agree. And although I've always felt Jared Anderson-Dolan was a solid player and admired his hard work, I'd also include him in that category. It is unlikely that the Kings would have lost Jared Anderson-Dolan to waivers. Would he have been so irreplaceable if they did? Would it have been so bad if, to have to put Fagemo, Turcotte, and Laferriere or someone else with a higher potential ceiling out there? In my humble opinion, the Kings made a mistake here, and as much as I hope to be proven wrong, I doubt the Kings will win the Cup this year. And even if they do, it won't be because of Jared Anderson-Dolan who was out there instead of Samuel Fagemo. Thanks, Eddie, and go Kings go. Enjoy the show, and also appreciate the opportunity to vent. Yeah, I mean, I talked about it a little bit. I don't really disagree with what you're saying. If you were asking me right now at this moment, who is more valuable to the Kings, Jared Anderson-Dolan or Samuel Fagemo, I would say Jared Anderson-Dolan, because we know he can play at the NHL level. We think Fagemo can play at the NHL level, but we don't know because he hasn't done it. Now, I think that Fagemo has a better ceiling, a higher ceiling than JAD, And down the line, I believe Foggy will have a better career than Jared Anderson-Dolan. So I don't disagree with you saying you should have put Anderson-Dolan on waivers, but obviously we can't predict whether he would have been claimed or not. We don't know. And the Kings are in it to win it right now. So they made the hard decision that they thought Jared Anderson-Dolan was a better fit right now, a bigger asset. Although it is interesting that they may end up putting JAD on waivers anyway. And if he doesn't get claimed, then obviously a lot of people are going to be upset about that, especially since they've shown that they're looking to play Grunstrom at the moment on that fourth line over Jared Anderson-Dolan, but we'll see if that changes as the season goes along. Mike in Carson City, Nevada also wants to check in on this subject. He says, I'm really bummed about losing Foggy for nothing. I do not understand why they would protect Anderson-Dolan over Foggy. Foggy is more gifted scorer, has much more upside than Anderson-Dolan. Management had to see this coming. Why not try to package something together for a trade, even a future mid-round pick or a trade to shore up our left side third D would have been better than just giving him away. This just makes me question how good a GM Rob Blake really is. He's done a decent job on trades and free agency, but the talent evaluation of draft picks just isn't there. How much of these high draft picks over the last several years have actually turned into high caliber NHL players? How about zero? Velarde, 11th overall, injury prone, took to age 23 to finally score 20 plus goals. Bjornfoot, 21st overall, looks like a bust. You can find vanilla defensive defenseman much later in the draft, not 21st overall. Kupari, 20th overall, destined to be a career bottom six forward. Kaliev, top second round pick, make or break season for him. Turcotte, 5th overall, injuries, not his fault, but still waiting. Trevor Zegras taken 7th. Byfield, 2nd overall, improving, but not anywhere near the production of Stützle, who was picked 3rd. Clark, 8th overall, looking to be the real deal, but we'll see. At 6 picks in the top 21, and Kaliev was rated just as high before sliding to the top of the second round. Not one of them are above average NHL players as of now. And let's not forget the horrific Cal Peterson contract. Well, there's a lot to chew on there, Mike, and I don't know that anything that you're saying is factually incorrect. I would say that Velarde and Kupari helped to turn into Pierre-Luc Dubois, so there's always that. And I don't know that, I mean, look, everything goes on Rob Blake's resume as the general manager. But he's not really doing the drafting. He gets final say, but this is about the scouting department and them making the picks. So again, it does go on Rob Blake's resume, but it's not like Rob Blake is doing the scouting and making the selections. But again, you're not wrong with most of what you said. The jury's still out on a couple of these guys. I would say, making a pick in the in the 20s, those players very rarely pan out. So you brought up Bjornfoot and Kupari. But obviously the picks in the top 10, like Turcotte, like Byfield, like Clark, you got to hit on those. And right now the jury is still out, but like I said, the jury is still out. We'll see. This comes from John Gibson in Tokyo, and he says, I am ambivalent about the Kings this season. On one hand, if they enjoy success, that means more coach T-Mac. If they don't, it means the fan base won't have to endure more of him. Even though he's not a loser, his defeatist comments last season in the midst of the playoff series in which he kept appealing the notion that both teams were better, essentially okaying a Kings loss, exhibit a lack of confidence that trickles down to the players. Comments like that are best served after the season, and I think he marginalizes talent in his system, thus production falls off or never gets going for some players. How do you or other listeners feel about the coach? I remember the comments that he made, and I asked you to clarify the comments, and you said it was when he said something to the effect of the Kings are a better team this year, but so are the Oilers. I personally didn't take anything away from that as far as comments that bothered me. I thought he was actually correct. The Kings were better, but so were the Oilers. I don't think that somehow was giving the Kings a free pass to lose the series. So I don't know. I didn't read into that what you have read into it, but that's me, and you're entitled to your opinion. I will say about Todd McLellen, like I said at the top of the show, I wouldn't have given him an extension. I would have made him coached for his job essentially this year. I don't have a huge problem with giving him the 1-year extension. He still needs to prove it this year. And one thing about Todd McLellen, look, the Kings had the second most wins and points in their history last season. If they would have sucked, we would have put a lot of blame on McLellen. So it's not fair if they have a really good year to not give him some credit. That having been said, the Kings are in a position, we've all talked about it, we all know it, where they have to have results this year. They have to win, and if he doesn't get the job done, then it's time to find somebody else who can. And he's known as a teacher. That's like his strength, apparently. And so I think what happens with the penalty kill this year, because apparently he's going to have his fingerprints all over it and teaching, is going to go a long way in determining what kind of coach that he is, essentially. So you mentioned you were ambivalent about the Kings this season. I'm kind of ambivalent about Todd McLellen. I like him personally. I think he's done a good job. But again, with the talent he has, a good job isn't good enough. And we could see a coaching change. I hope we don't, because if we don't, that means the Kings have had the success that they wanted to have this season. But I think a lot of Kings fans are lukewarm on Todd McLellen at best. I don't think anyone's going to cry a lot of tears if we make a coaching change. But again, I think we all want him to do good, because if he does good, that means the Kings have done good. This comes from Brian in Mesa, Arizona. It says, a little trivia question for you in the audience. It's been stated several times this offseason that Anze Kopitar has been the Kings' leading scorer in all but 2 seasons of his career. What 2 years did he not lead the team in scoring, and who did? His first season, by the way, Kopitar, was 2006-2007. Well, I will admit, Brian, I would not have gotten either of these right, and I'm not great with years. But the answer is, we'll give you a second to think about it. You can even pause the podcast if you want to go over it in your mind. The answer is 2016-17, Michael Camilleri with 80 points, and 2016-17, Jeff Carter with 66 points. Brian says, thanks for the great show. Go Kings, go. Thank you, Brian, for your little trivia question. Up next, we're going to check in on some YouTube comments. That is next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, when you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/locked-on to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right. We do have some YouTube comments to read for you guys as far as the feedback show. And we'll start with some comments on losing Samuel Foggymo to waivers. This from TR Burns 826. He says, I don't understand why people are having such a crazy reaction to losing Foggymo. There's not a spot for him here. He's 23, and given the youth movement of just a few years, he's had time to prove it and get the call up. So far in the preseason, both Turcotte and LaFerriere have looked better and are waiver exempt. Fans often get too infatuated with prospects. This team is in a win now mode, and if he was ready to crack the top 9, he'd get a shot. That's not the case. Hopefully it works out for him in Nashville, but it wasn't going to happen here. That's just the nature of the game. Well, I would say it wasn't going to happen here this season, but I think, like I said, I like Samuel Foggymo's skills. I think he's got better hands, better shooting touch. He's a guy that can play on your second power play unit. That's not the case for guys like Carl Grundstrom and Jared Anderson-Dolan. So down the road, I don't know, that Foggymo will be a better player than those guys. But again, the Kings are in a win now mode. Foggymo wasn't going to help the NHL roster this year unless there were injuries. So I get the hard decision to put him on waivers. Unfortunately, he got claimed. Photo Guy 49 says the continued overvaluing of Jared Anderson-Dolan is mind-boggling. He's a vanilla player who does just enough to be a borderline NHL player. The writing is very likely on the wall before camp even started for Sammy due to the baffling signing of 36-year-old Trevor Lewis, a player with the majority of tread off the tires. But hey, a nostalgia signing, so maybe shores up Yanni's terrible defensive system in PK. So instead of giving a prospect a legit shot who has done everything asked of him in Ontario and paid his dues, we get Louis. Now, if you're Blake, you know you're at the cap and have a surplus of young talent that needs to clear. Thus, you move said asset prior to camp or even at the draft to get at least something back for a 40-goal AHL scoring 23-year-old winger. Blake did so well. Blake went so all in on PLD. It's hard against the cap for a player, and that he's losing prospects for nothing. I will push back on the Trevor Lewis criticism. I think Trevor Lewis is a great signing. I think it's not just about nostalgia. He can still play. He's a fourth line grinder. He brings Stanley Cup experience. He's going to help your penalty kill. I'm very high on Trevor Lewis. And yes, he doesn't have much left. Maybe this is his last year. Maybe this is a last kick at the can as far as going for a cup. But I think Trevor Lewis is going to be an asset for the Kings this year. So I will push back on that a bit. This on the Arthur Kaliev suspension from Frank Pareda 1106. He says, mixed feelings about the Kaliev suspension. An accident or unfortunate collision is one thing, but on purpose is another. You can essentially ruin a player's career with one play like that. I've heard from some hockey commentators that the suspension should match the injury recovery time. I was the victim of a knee-on-knee contact in my early 20s, done on purpose, and suffered a complete rupture of the ACL. Had to wear a huge brace from that injury in order to continue playing. The other guy got a 2-minute penalty. Maybe I'm too biased or personally involved to be fair-minded, but purposefully targeting a knee should definitely be highly frowned upon. Well, Frank, I certainly get your personal feelings on that one. And I think I don't disagree with your opinion at all. My only problem with the Kaliev suspension is that it's not consistent with what the NHL has done in the past. So why was this different? Because of the injury? There have been other injuries. There have been malicious things done that have caused serious injury to players, and those players have not gotten 4 games. So all I'm asking is for consistency. I'm not trying to defend Arthur Kaliev. I think what he did was wrong. And I feel sympathy for the Ducks player who was injured for basically, he did nothing. He wasn't the one who hit Kaliev on the play just moments before that. So again, all I want is the NHL to be consistent, and they almost never are. And they deserve to be called out for that. And finally, on the Kings having ads on the jerseys that they're selling to fans, this comes from Joey A, 8721. It says, concur with no for the ads on jerseys. What the hell are the Kings thinking? Bob Billy, the WY, he says it's amazing that they would put ads on fans' jerseys and not expect them to get a bit upset. People should sew their own Kings patches to cover up the ad. I don't think you're out of line, Eddie, because I wouldn't take them any effort to exclude them on the jerseys. It's lame publicity among fans worthy of extra stitching that Liberty Mutual paid them. Actually, it was it's not Liberty Mutual, it's Mercury Insurance. But yeah, I mean, we shouldn't have to put something over an ad on our jersey or sew something on or take it off or whatever. It shouldn't be there in the first place. That's lame. And Stateless One says, I definitely won't spend a dime for a jersey with an ad on it. I'm a season ticket holder and buy almost every jersey the Kings have come out. Fans will not spend a dime, in all capitals, tired of the corporate greed. My wife said, did you see they're putting ads on the fans, on the jerseys they're selling the fans? I'm like, yes, I did. I just did a little rant on it. And she's like, that's ridiculous. Yeah, you're going to be hard to find any fan that says, boy, I sure am a fan of that Mercury Insurance ad on my jersey. Like I said, Mercury Insurance isn't paying us anything. I get that they're paying the Kings and why they have the patch on their jersey, but they ain't giving us anything. All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you, as always, for listening. Now, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch every day, Monday, we're going to have a recap of the Kings preseason finale on Saturday against the Golden Knights. We are also scheduled, and I hope this happens because I'm very excited, to have an interview with longtime Kings broadcaster Nick Nixon. That will be either on Monday or probably Tuesday or Wednesday. Probably Tuesday, I hope. We'll see. We're also going to schedule to have a crossover episode with the guys from Locked On Avalanche to get you ready for the Kings season opener against the Avalanche. So that'll be fun. Thursday, obviously, we'll recap that season opening game. And then Friday, we'll have whatever news is going on and another fan feedback show. So excited about next week. Excited for that Nick Nixon interview. Excited to get the season going for the LA Kings. So we haven't talked about it. We probably will next week. They opened the season with a really tough schedule. They're playing some really good teams to start the year. So the Kings hopefully will be ready to go right from the start. And it starts against a very good Avalanche team next Wednesday. We'd love for you to stay interactive with the show all week long, 24/7. You can stay connected through Twitter and also Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. Obviously, thank you to everyone who took the time to comment on YouTube, to send emails. The show isn't possible without you. If you want to send an email for next week's show or for anything else, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.